They say the forest still remembers. Not in the way a man might remember, with fading images or half-kept journals, but with something deeper. Something older. Roots curl around the truth, stones whisper when the moon is high, and the river never forgets what was given to it. Long ago, before the roads were straight and the lights too bright, there was a village near the edge of the great forest. Its name is not spoken anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because no one dares remember it aloud. Even the crows that once circled its thatched rooftops have long since chosen quieter skies. The land where it stood lies fallow now, swallowed by nettles and moss, as though the forest had finally crept forth and decided to take back what it had always claimed as its own. The elders say the village was small but proud, its people bound together by stubborn tradition and quiet fear. They respected the forest, or so they said, but in truth they feared it. They did not speak its name after sundown, and they never built their homes too close to the treeline. At night, they would bar their doors with ashwood and burn sage by their windows. Children were warned never to step past the last stone marker, the one shaped like a kneeling woman. They called it the mourner, though no one knew why. Some claimed it wept blood when the wind was right. But the village thrived in its way. Crops grew, animals bred, the sun rose and fell. Until it didn't. It began with small things. A goat found stiff and twisted by the barn, eyes gone white, the well water turning sour even after the blessing. Then the harvest rotted before the reaping. A baby was born silent, with eyes open and watching. And though none spoke of it plainly, they all looked toward the forest. Blame is a hungry thing. It looks for the smallest difference, the quietest child, the one who does not cry when the others do. They found her in that difference. A girl with dark hair like river silt and eyes the color of drowned leaves. She was born during a storm, and her mother had died giving her breath. They said the midwife heard the wind whisper when the girl cried her first. They said she never laughed, never aged right. They said her name wrong, as if misnaming her might weaken her. Some tales begin with heroes or kings. This one begins with a girl who was neither, only a child who never asked for the weight of fear placed on her back. And so, when the village reached its edge, when the crops failed for the third year and the river ran with something thick beneath the surface, they gathered. Not with torches or fury, no, nothing so bold. Folktales lie when they speak of pitchforks. This was quieter. They came at dawn, before the birds had stirred, wrapped her in linens like a shroud, and carried her into the forest as if she were already a ghost. She did not scream. Some say she didn't speak at all. Just stared with those old green eyes, too knowing for someone so young. It unnerved them. Made them hurry. They left her where the trees grew close and the moss was too thick to see soil beneath. A place where the wind did not pass and light pooled weakly as if afraid to linger. They placed a charm at her feet, a simple thing, a doll of sticks and red thread, and turned away. Not one looked back. The forest accepted her without sound. 4 days after, the village waited. Expected something. A cleansing wind. Rain. A sign. But nothing came. Instead, on the 7th night, the mourner stone cracked. That was when they knew, not with their minds perhaps, but somewhere in the dark pit of their chests, that the forest had not taken her in silence. That it had, in fact, kept her. Some left the village after that. Others stayed, too proud or too afraid. But within 3 winters the village had vanished. Some say it was swallowed by brambles overnight. Others claim the river rose and never receded. A few whisper that they heard a voice in the night calling their names, not cruel but curious. And still the forest remains. Children in nearby hamlets are warned not to stray too far east. Travelers speak of glimpses in the trees, a woman with river-wet hair, a girl who hums lullabies that twist in your ears. Some return from the woods with mud caked to their eyes and forget their names for a while. One man returned with silver in his mouth and never spoke again. But ask the old women, the ones who still leave milk by the doorstep when the moon is dark, and they will tell you, quietly with their eyes averted, that the forest never forgets. She was left to die. But the forest, in its own unknowable way, decided otherwise. And near the river, where the water runs cold and fast even in summer, something waits, not for vengeance, not for forgiveness, but for the next voice that dares to call her name. You must understand, this is not a story of cruelty, nor of mercy. It is a story of what happens when the wild listens and remembers. Her name was Elka. Not many used it. Most called her the girl, or that child, or simply turned their eyes away when she passed. In a village where names carried meaning, where each syllable was wrapped in family, history, and faith, Elka's name stood out like a broken tooth. Too short, too foreign, too sharp. It was her mother's doing, they said. A woman from the highlands, wild in the blood, who came down with the snows one year and never left. She married a woodsman, gave birth, and died with her child still wet in her arms. Elke never cried when they placed her in the arms of the midwife. She simply looked. The midwife's apprentice later told others that when she glanced into the baby's eyes, she saw a flicker of something too old to be a child. It made her drop the basin of water. It was written off, of course: nerves, exhaustion, the cold. But stories cling to the skin of a village like burrs, and this one dug deep. As Elke grew, so did the distance between her and the other children. She didn't speak until she was 4, but when she did, her first words weren't "mama" or "milk," but a full sentence: "The river is angry today." No one taught her to read, yet she could trace the runes carved into the stones near the well, pronouncing them with eerie accuracy. She wandered too close to the mourner's stone, sat at its base as though it comforted her. She would talk to crows, and worse, they would answer. They whispered things about her. That she was born under the wrong star. That her breath drew frost in summer. That her dreams could shape the wind. And yet she was not cruel. Only separate. Her foster family, the blacksmith and his wife, did what they could. But the wife's womb remained empty after Elke came into the house, and by the 3rd year the woman wept each night. The blacksmith grew silent, shoulders stooped as though carrying some unseen burden. They never struck her, never cast her out, but love needs more than duty to bloom, and Elke grew in a house full of sighs. She learned to be still. To listen. She listened to the trees outside her window. To the way the brook behind the forge changed its voice before rain. To the animals that always seemed to pause when she came near, as if measuring something. It was the year of the withered spring that sealed her fate. The snow melted early, but the thaw brought no warmth. Buds blackened on the branches, and the sheep bore still lambs. Then came the fire. A freak bolt of lightning, clear sky and all, struck the silo. Grain gone. Hope thinned. Then in the 3rd month the baker's wife gave birth to a boy. He was born with a cowl over his face, skin pale as milk and breathless. The midwife declared it a sign, one way or another. It was then, with all eyes still wet from mourning, that someone said Elke's name. Not shouted. Just spoken. And that was all it took. In a place built on fear and faith, suggestion was enough. They whispered that she had cursed the field when she walked across it barefoot last harvest. That she had stared too long at the pregnant belly of the baker's wife. That her presence soured milk. That she was a vessel for the old things, the ones the forest buried in root and shadow. At first, the elders refused to speak of it openly. But whispers grew. They always do. Then came the night the river ran thick with fish that floated belly up. The smell lingered for days. That was the end of doubt. The vote was silent. There were no torches, no trials, no smoke and fury. Just a quiet gathering in the longhouse. A decision. An agreement. They would not call it a sacrifice, only a return. A return to the forest that had spawned her. To the place that called her. That was the word they used, called. When they came for her, Elke did not resist. She stood at the door of the blacksmith's house, already dressed, barefoot on the frost-damp earth. She looked at the 3 men who had come, the carpenter, the cooper, and the hunter, and nodded. She didn't speak. They tied her hands not roughly but firmly. Ropes made from flax. Not the usual bindings, these were braided with sprigs of elder and wormwood, tucked tight with charms. The blacksmith stood on his porch, jaw clenched. His wife wept into her apron. Elke didn't look back. They walked in silence through the village. Doors were closed. Curtains drawn. No children peered out. The only sound was the crunch of frost under boots. The forest loomed ahead, indifferent. When they reached the mourner's stone, the cooper hesitated. The air was thick there, damp even in the morning sun. Shadows pooled too dark beneath the trees. The hunter muttered a blessing, but it cracked halfway through. Elke stepped past the stone on her own. The 3 men followed, slowly, cautiously. They moved deep, deeper than even the boldest woodcutters dared. Past the groves where trees leaned too close and the moss grew on every side of the trunk. Past the place where birds stopped singing. They found a clearing ringed with stones. At its center, a tree taller than any oak, with bark black as pitch and roots like twisted limbs. It was not marked on any map. No one had ever spoken of it. But somehow they knew. There they laid her down. They did not speak words of farewell. The hunter placed the charm beside her head, a loop of braided rushes with a single crow feather tied in. The cooper lit a small candle, left it by her bound feet. Then they left. Not one looked back. Elke lay still. She listened. She felt the heartbeat of the forest beneath her, slow, deep, like the breath of something old and dreaming. The roots shifted slightly beneath her shoulder. A hush fell over the clearing, the kind that comes before snowfall. Above her, the branches stirred though there was no wind. Then came the sound, soft like a whisper pressed to the skin. It was not a voice, not at first. More a sensation. You are seen. Elka closed her eyes. The bindings loosened on their own, though no hand touched them. The candle went out, though there was no breeze. The forest leaned closer. And somewhere not far off, perhaps only 100 steps away, water laughed against stone, bright and cold and knowing. The forest did not ask her to rise. It simply waited. And Elka, left to die, began to dream. She awoke to silence. Not the kind of silence that soothes or settles. This was deeper, so complete it pressed in on her ears, made her chest ache. No birds. No wind. No distant rustle of branch or creature. Just the hum of stillness, too loud in its emptiness. Elka blinked, her vision slow to return. Above her, the canopy stretched like a woven shroud, green-black and endless. Light filtered down in slivers, catching in the fine mist that clung to the ground. It was hard to tell the hour. The sky seemed farther away than it should have been. Her back ached. Her arms were numb. Her fingers tingled with returning blood where the ropes had cut into them. She sat up slowly, body stiff and sore, and tasted copper in her mouth. The clearing was empty. The charm was gone. No footprints in the moss. Not even the remains of the candle the cooper had left. She might have dreamed it all, if not for the ache in her joints and the flecks of blood under her nails. The air was heavy here, thick with moisture, and the scent of earth turned too long beneath the same canopy. It smelled old. Not in the way a cellar smells, but ancient, like something that had never been born yet never died. She stood. The effort made her dizzy, but instinct urged her to move. She could not say why. The forest pulled at her, not with cruelty but with a kind of gravity. It didn't demand, it expected. With each step, the ground shifted softly beneath her feet. Moss gave way to spongy soil, and roots crisscrossed the floor like the bones of something buried shallow. Trees leaned in strange angles, none quite right. Their trunks bent in crescents or twisted like braids. Some were split open as though by lightning, their insides still dark with sap that smelled faintly sweet and vaguely wrong. She saw no birds. No deer. No insects. Yet there were signs of life. Once, she passed a tree with claw marks raked across its bark, too high and too wide for any bear she knew of. Another time, she stepped into a patch of ground that crunched beneath her. Looking down, she saw it littered with bones. Tiny ones. Birds maybe. Or not. Some had too many joints. One skull had 2 eye sockets stacked one above the other. The forest changed around her. Paths appeared where none had been, only to vanish once she turned. Hollow logs beckoned like doorways. Ferns shifted as if something unseen brushed past. She did not hear it, not exactly, but she felt it. A presence that followed just beyond sight, neither hostile nor friendly. Curious perhaps. She drank from a pool once, only to vomit moments later. The water had tasted fine, cold and clean, but left her stomach twisting. After that, she waited to drink only when she saw birds, if any appeared at all. The hunger came quickly. By the second day, her limbs trembled with every movement. Her lips cracked. Her vision blurred at the edges. She tried to eat bark, a few bitter berries. Once she found mushrooms, delicate and white like spun sugar, but when she bit one, her tongue went numb. She spat it out and stumbled forward. Sleep was worse. It came in waves, brief and brutal. She'd collapse against a tree and fall into dreams that felt more like drowning. She saw her mother, face pale and eyes shadowed, standing ankle-deep in the river, mouth moving but making no sound. She saw the mourner stone, bleeding from its cracks, vines sprouting from its eyes. She saw the village burning, but not from fire, from the inside out, its people lit like paper lanterns, their eyes empty and glowing. Once, she dreamed of hands, dozens of them reaching up from the ground, pale and slender, clawing at her ankles with no malice. Only need. In her waking hours, she heard voices on the wind. Soft, repetitive, like a chant in a forgotten tongue. Sometimes they whispered her name. Sometimes they asked questions she didn't understand. What did you bury? Or, where is your shadow? She answered once. I don't know, she whispered. The trees creaked in reply. She stopped speaking after that. Time bent strangely. Day and night became suggestions, not rules. The light in the forest never turned full gold or full black, only gray, soft green, silver blue. She walked until she dropped. Walked again. But always she felt the pull. It came not from above or around, but forward and downward, like a cord threaded through her ribs. It was strongest when she neared valleys or heard faint sounds beneath the stillness. On the fourth day, or what she guessed was the fourth, she smelled water. Not the stagnant pools she'd passed before. This was sharper, cleaner. A living scent. She followed it, stumbling, branches clawing at her arms, thorns tearing through her skirt. Her feet bled. She barely noticed. The trees grew taller as she descended, their bark pale and smooth like the skin of river stones. The mist thickened, curling around her ankles like curious cats. Leaves brushed her cheeks. Once she heard laughter, light and distant. A child's or a woman's, she could not tell. She ran. Or thought she did. Her body moved sluggishly, but her mind surged ahead, driven by the sound of running water. The pull grew stronger. Then, suddenly, the trees parted. She emerged onto a bank of black river sand, the color of slate. Before her, a river flowed, wide and deep, its surface nearly still despite the current she could feel beneath it. The water was dark, yet not dirty. It glimmered in places where the light touched it. She could see no bottom, but she sensed no danger. The moment her feet touched the sand, the pull stopped. Silence returned, not the stifling hush of before, but a true quiet. Peaceful. Waiting. Elka collapsed to her knees. Tears came then, not from fear or relief but something more elemental. Something that had no words. She knelt there for a long time, hands in her lap, head bowed. Then, slowly she looked up. Across the river, half veiled in mist, someone stood watching her. Tall. Motionless. Cloaked in green and shadow. She blinked. The figure was gone. But she no longer felt alone. The river shimmered as though it had swallowed the stars. It wound through the forest like a silver ribbon, quiet and deliberate, its current smooth but steady. The air along its banks was cooler, touched with the scent of moss and crushed mint. Unlike the rest of the forest, which twisted and watched and pressed in, the river exhaled calm. It hummed with old songs just beneath the surface. Songs made not of words but movement, the way water touched stone, the way it held light. Elka crouched by the edge, cupping water to her lips. This time it didn't burn or twist in her gut. It settled. Cold, clean, alive. She sat back and stared into the river's face. It did not reflect like a mirror. Instead, it showed pieces of her, her hand in motion, the edge of her skirt, the shadow of something behind her, always just out of full view. It felt as though the river remembered things she did not. She was too tired to be afraid. It was then that she saw her. Across the water, on a stone that jutted like an altar, a figure stood ankle-deep in the current. A woman, or something shaped like one, draped in river-wet cloth that clung to her body like bark to a tree. Her hair flowed like reeds, long and tangled, threaded with shells, bones, and bits of mirror. Her eyes were silver. Not gray, silver like metal or moonlight. She was not old the way humans grow old, with wrinkles and bent backs. She was old like water, worn, patient, impossible to hold. Elka rose slowly, heart pounding, and stepped closer to the river's edge. "I need help," she said, her voice hoarse. The woman tilted her head. She did not blink. "I'm not supposed to be here," Elka whispered. "They left me, and I don't know what to do." The river witch smiled. It was not kind nor cruel. Just true. As if she had heard such things before, 1,000 times and would again. "You came," the woman said, though her mouth did not move. The words echoed like a ripple across Elka's mind. Elka nodded. "I didn't know where else to go." "You followed the pull," the river witch said. "Few do. Fewer still survive the walk." Elka felt a tremor in her bones. "What are you?" The woman did not answer at once. Instead, she stepped further into the current, the water parting without a sound. With each movement, her form shifted, old crone, river girl, weeping mother, stone-eyed goddess. She was all of them. Or none. "I am what the water makes me," she said. "I am what you see when you need something more than the world has given." Elka felt tears burning again, but she held them back. "Can you help me?" "I can," said the river witch. "But the river never gives without taking. What will it take?" The woman looked at her, and in that moment, the water rose between them, not high, but enough to show 100,000 faces, flickering just beneath the surface. Women, girls, children. All with eyes full of hunger, grief, rage, and knowing. "What you were," the witch said. "And what you thought you would become." Elka didn't understand. Not fully. But she nodded anyway. The witch stepped forward, and now she was on Elka's side of the river, though the water hadn't moved. "Then you will begin." She reached out and touched Elka's forehead with fingers like river-smoothed stone. The world tilted. The river roared. And Elka was no longer standing. She was sinking, not into water but into memory or something older. She saw her mother's face again, not pale but alive, singing in a tongue she had never known. She saw her own hands burying something beneath the mourner stone. She saw the forest from above, shaped like a sleeping beast. She saw herself as a child, alone in the dark and the dark listening. Then the visions faded and she was back on the riverbank, gasping. The witch stood unmoved. "That was the first," she said. "There will be 3. Elka shivered. Her skin felt stretched, her heart raw. "What are they for?" she asked. The witch looked down at the river. "To unmake you," she said. "So the forest can make you again." The first trial began with a cup of carved bone, held out to her by the river witch without a word. The water inside shimmered with strange colors, not silver, not blue, but shifting, layered, as if it held depths too deep for this world. When Elka looked too long, she saw glimpses of things. Wolves running backwards through fire, hands rising from still ponds, stars spinning in reverse. She hesitated. But the river witch only watched. Elka drank. It was not like drinking water. It was like swallowing time. The taste was not a taste at all, but a flooding of sensation, cold births, old griefs, screams inside caves, songs sung in dying tongues. The river's memory poured through her like floodwater, and she could not hold it. She dropped to her knees, gasping, retching into the sand. And when she looked up again, the world was different. She could see the trees breathing. They inhaled with light and exhaled shadow. The birds above her spoke in tones that resonated behind her eyes. The air shimmered with threads, thin, golden strands that connected root to stone, bird to branch, Elka to the earth beneath her. "You drank what most forget," said the river witch. "Now the forest sees you." The second trial came at dawn. Elka awoke to a heron watching her from the shallows. Its eyes were cloudless, ancient. When she moved, it did not flee. "You are still bound," it said. Elka blinked. Its beak had not moved. But the words were there, clear. "By what?" "By what you feared to lose," it replied. "Speak the name of what you love most. Only then will your mouth be freed." She thought of the village. But not the houses or the people, no. She thought of the willow behind the blacksmith's shed. Of her mother's scarf hidden in the rafters. Of the way the morning bread smelled before the ovens burned. "Elka," she whispered, "I love myself." The heron blinked once. Then it spread its wings, turned to mist, and was gone. After that, the river changed. It flowed quieter. Or perhaps it listened harder. The third trial was the cruelest. The river which led her to a still pool beneath a willow, far from the main current. There the water was glass. "Look," the witch said. Elka did. In the surface she saw herself, but not as she was. She saw every version she could have been. A girl growing up in the village, quiet and kind. A young woman married off to the butcher's son. A mother burying her own child. A crone alone in a cottage with no name. Then she saw darker paths, herself as a wanderer, teeth sharp, voice cold. Herself as a shadow crouched in the trees. Herself as nothing, swallowed by the forest, forgotten by time. The reflections began to speak. "Why didn't you fight them? Why didn't you run? You were never meant to be saved. You will become her, you already are." The voices layered atop one another, rising like wind in the trees. Elka's hands trembled. Her knees buckled. But she did not look away. "I am none of you," she said. "And all of you." Silence fell like snow. The water went still. When she looked again, her reflection met her gaze and bowed. The river which stood beside her, nodding. "You have unlearned your fear," she said. "Now the forest may name you." That night, Elka slept beneath the stars. For the first time she dreamed not of pain but of memory. She dreamed of the first tree rooted in a field of bones. Of rivers that spoke in riddles. Of a woman kneeling in the water, her hands full of lilies and blood. When she woke, the river which was seated nearby, plaiting strands of Elka's cut hair into a charm. "You were cast out," Elka said softly. "Weren't you?" The woman did not answer immediately. "I was given away," she said. "Not by people but by choice. I bound myself to the river when I could no longer carry my name." "Why?" "Because some names are too heavy for a single life. The forest held them for me until I was ready." Elka understood then. She was not being saved. She was being forged. The river did not offer mercy. It offered clarity through fire, water, and silence. The river which handed her the charm. "You will carry this to the mourner stone," she said. "When you return, you will not be who they remember." Elka held the charm in her hands. It was warm. Alive. She looked at the witch. What will I be? The woman smiled, soft and strange. You will be what the forest made. Elka did not say goodbye. The river which watched her from the shallows, eyes as still as the surface of the water, arms folded in silence. There were no words between them, none were needed. Everything that could be spoken had already passed between their hands, their breath, their dreams. When Elka stepped onto the forest path again, it was not with hesitation. The forest recognized her now. Trees no longer leaned away but bent slightly as she passed, as if bowing. Ferns curled in greeting, and the birds above her called out in voices she could understand, though she did not answer aloud. The golden threads of light that once danced just out of reach now tangled gently around her wrists and ankles like old friends guiding her home. She moved with certainty, feet bare, hair damp with river mist. It was no longer the tangled brown of her childhood. It shone with pale silver, fine as spider silk, threaded with a glimmer like moonlight. Her eyes, once the green of damp moss, now held something deeper, a flicker of reflected starlight, the color of still water at night. Around her shoulders draped a shawl of woven reeds and crow feathers, gifted by the river witch. At her side walked a creature, not quite a wolf, not quite a dog. Its fur was black where the light struck and deep blue where it didn't. It moved silently, its yellow eyes ever watchful. The journey back was swift. The forest no longer shifted to confuse her. Paths opened, clear and sure. Trees whispered as she passed, and the wind played gently with her hair, not as a threat but as a blessing. When she emerged from the treeline near the old mourner stone, the village lay in sight. Smaller than she remembered. The rooftops sagged a little more. The forge's chimney was cold. Fields stretched out in pale patches, dry, brittle things. The river had turned away months ago, its banks cracked and thirsty. Elka stood a moment, letting the silence settle around her. The wind stilled. The creature at her side sat back on its haunches, watching. Then she walked forward. One by one the villagers noticed her. A child pointed first. Then a woman fetching water dropped her pail. Someone called a name, it wasn't hers but it didn't matter. Doors creaked open. Curtains twitched. Eyes peered out, widened. She stepped into the square. No one stopped her. No one spoke. They knew her. They knew what she was. The blacksmith stepped from his porch. His beard had gone gray at the edges. His hands trembled. Elka, he said, voice hoarse. She met his eyes. There was no anger in her. No heat. Only truth. I was never gone, she said simply. The baker's wife crossed herself. An old man muttered a prayer. Someone whispered which under their breath. The black dog beside her growled, low and soft. I am not here for vengeance, Elka said. The forest does not hold grudges. The words were not hers alone. They echoed with the weight of root and stone, leaf and stream. A child stepped forward. A girl no older than 5. Pale hair. Wide eyes. She held out a small blossom, a crushed daisy. For you, she said. Elka knelt and took it gently. The tension broke like mist in the sun. One by one the villagers came forward. Not all. Some still watched from behind shutters. But others, the old, the very young, the weary, stepped out. No apologies were spoken. No forgiveness offered. That was not the way of old stories. But the way they looked at her changed. Not pity. Not fear. Like a storm made flesh. Like a season given skin. And Elka, reborn of river and trial, stood quietly in their gaze, not to be worshipped, not to be feared. Only to be remembered. She left before the first frost. There were no farewells, no celebration. No one tried to stop her. They watched from behind their doors and fences, quiet as snowfall, knowing better than to call her by a name she no longer wore. Elka walked through the village one last time. Past the forge where the coals no longer burned. Past the well where children now left sprigs of herbs and pennies made of clay. Past the mourner stone, where someone had placed a wreath of river grass. The wind carried her forward. She crossed the fields, now greening again, seeds taking hold where the soil had once refused to bloom. Trees had been planted, crooked saplings, fragile yet brave, at the border where the village met the forest. As she passed them, she paused to touch each one, letting the threads of the forest settle through her fingertips. The creature walked beside her still, the shadow beast with eyes like coals and fur that shimmered with the deep blue dusk. It had no name, nor did it need one. It was bound to her, as the river was to stone, as silence was to snow. When she stepped past the mourner stone, her feet sank slightly into the loam. Not in resistance, in welcome. The forest no longer swallowed her. It opened for her. The trees knew her now. The moss warmed beneath her tread. Vines curled softly from branch to branch, braiding themselves into strange shapes that glowed faintly when she passed. Birds sang low songs that changed their rhythm with her breath. The sky above thickened into a mist of green and gold, shot through with light that felt like memory. She followed no path. She didn't need one. The river waited as it always had. She found it in the same place, though it somehow felt different, larger, wider, deeper in presence than before. The current carried a richer song. The banks were lined with lilies, bones, feathers, and stones wrapped in thread, all offerings, some new, some ancient. The river greeted her with a whisper only she could hear. "Welcome back." The river which was there, seated on her stone in the water, hair wet and glistening, fingers trailing just beneath the surface. Her face was unchanged, or perhaps it was more changed than Elka could now recognize. She was river and woman, memory and mirror. "You returned," the witch said. "I was always coming back," Elka answered. The witch studied her. "You are not the same." "I am not." The witch smiled. "And yet you remember." "I remember everything." That was enough. No words passed between them for a while. Just silence, full, sacred, alive. Elka walked into the water. It did not chill her. It curled around her like breath, like skin, like fire without flame. The current did not resist. It carried her forward, deeper, until she stood beside the stone. The river which touched her brow once, then stepped down into the water, deeper and deeper, until she vanished. No farewell. No ceremony. Only a presence sinking into the river's heart. Elka stood alone. And then, not alone. The river shifted. She felt it in her ribs, in her teeth, in her breath. The current had accepted her. She climbed the stone and knelt there. She watched the forest from her perch. Watched the creatures that came to drink. The owls that circled without sound. The fog that rose in ribbons. The stars that blinked open above her, one by one. Time softened. The days passed like thoughts. The moon came and went. Rain fell and the river swelled. Snow dusted the trees and melted into the soil, feeding everything beneath. She spoke less. She listened more. When travelers came, and some did, they found her only if the forest allowed it. A boy once stumbled upon her stone, eyes wide with wonder. He had been running from a home that beat him, tears dried into the edges of his face. She did not speak, only held out her hand. He touched it, and when he returned to his village he no longer limped. He did not speak of her. But he planted trees behind his house, left fish bones on his doorstep, spoke to rivers. Another time, a woman came barefoot, humming a song of grief too old for words. She carried a bundle in her arms, a child who did not breathe. She placed the child in the shallows and wept until she slept. When she awoke, the child was gone. In its place was a lily, blooming through frost. The woman returned each year to sing, not out of pain but memory. And so the years turned. Elka became a story again. They called her different things: the water's bride, the silver one, the morning spirit, the forest's mercy. Children left small carvings by the river's edge. Old women left honey and milk when their dreams turned sour. Once someone carved her name into a tree, Elka, and the tree bled gold. But no one truly knew her. Not the girl she had been. Not the witch she had become. Only the river knew. And it kept her name in silence. One day a traveler found the river again. Not by chance, never by chance, but by something older than direction. The traveler was a girl, no older than Elka had been when she was left in the forest. She wore boots worn thin, eyes wide with questions, heart heavy with a name she could no longer carry. She reached the river bank and fell to her knees. She did not cry. She waited. And there, on the stone above the current, sat a woman with silver hair and eyes like night water. At her side lay a beast that shimmered like ink in firelight. The girl looked up. The woman looked down. Neither spoke. The river listened. And so, the story began again. They say the forest is still there. Not as it was, not wild and untamed, not entirely, but quieter now, older than any map dares record. Roads do not pass through it. Birds fly wide circles around its heart. And somewhere deep within, the river winds its slow silver way through root and rock and memory. You won't find it on your own. You might think you have. You might follow the trails, hear the rush of water, even glimpse a flicker of light between the trees. But the forest decides. Not the traveler. Not the hunter. Not the curious child. The forest chooses who may see and when and why. There are stories, of course. There are always stories. Old ones mostly. Whispered at winter hearths, carved into beams, sewn into lullabies. You've heard them, The ones about the girl they cast into the woods. The one they blamed for storms and sickness. The one who didn't die. They say she walks still, barefoot and pale, marked by river light. That she never speaks, only listens. That she knows your name before you say it. They say she can heal you, if you come with clean hands and an honest heart. They say she'll disappear if you try to trick her. They say if you lie to the river will lie to you, and you'll never find your way home again. But if you are truly lost, not just your feet but your soul, your name, your place in the world, and you kneel at the water's edge, quiet as leaf fall, with your fear held open like an offering, you might hear her. Or see a figure on the stone, silver hair drifting like mist, a beast at her side, and her gaze as still and deep as the river itself. You must not speak first. You must not demand. Only wait. And if she reaches out a hand, take it. Gently. There's a carving on the mourner stone near the edge of the forest. Worn by time, moss-wrapped. The letters are hard to read, but the shape of them remains. A single name. Some say it's hers. Some say it's a warning. A few, mostly the old women who hum while they mend, who stir herbs clockwise and never take more than they need from the earth, say it's neither. It's a door. A generation has passed. Maybe two. The village is no longer the one from the old tale. Roofs are mended. Fields are fertile. Children play without fear near the trees. But they still leave offerings by the river. Not because they are afraid, not anymore. Because they remember. Once, a boy disappeared for 2 days. He was found near the mourner stone, asleep, dry and unharmed, a fish scale pressed to his palm and feathers braided in his hair. He never spoke of what he saw. But he never lied again, not once. Another time, an old hunter followed a stag too far into the wood. The trail vanished. His lantern failed. He stumbled until his legs gave way. He awoke on the riverbank with a silver thread tied around his wrist and his bad knee healed. He left an entire cart of apples by the water every year until he died. There are songs now, sung by children, where the girl becomes a queen of the river, or a spirit made of fog. Sometimes she wears a crown of lilies. Sometimes her fingers are claws. She is both mercy and warning. She is change. One child asked her grandmother why they always left honey by the stream. The woman smiled. Because she tastes sorrow in it, she said, and knows we still remember. Some say the river which never left, that Elka became her or was always her. That she rose from something older than the village, older than even the trees. Others say she passed on, that a new girl, the one who knelt at the water long ago, now sits on the stone. They are both right, and both wrong. That's the way of stories. I tell you this not as truth but as memory. I heard the tale when I was young, sitting beneath a full moon, a bowl of ash at our feet and salt on the windowsill. The voice that told it was cracked and quiet, but clear as spring water. Don't go into the woods alone, the voice said. But if you must, if you are lost, if you are broken, go with your hands open. Go with your head low. Go without taking. And if the river calls your name, answer softly. You might think this is all just a tale. That no girl ever rose from the roots of the forest. That no silver-haired woman ever sat on a stone and guided the lost home again. That's fine. Not all truths are meant for believing. But some night, when the fog hangs heavy and the wind tastes like cedar, you may find yourself walking a path you don't remember choosing. And you may hear the river, not loud, not clear, but steady. And you may feel the pull. When that happens, stop. Kneel. And listen. Somewhere just ahead, just beyond the curve of the bank, a voice waits. And she remembers you. They say the forest remembers. Not as people do, in dates and details and hardline facts. The forest remembers in breath, in silence, in the way a branch curves when it's bent by grief. In how moss grows over wounds cut by axes. In how roots lean toward buried bones. The forest remembers in patterns, in rhythm, in the stories it chooses to keep alive. You will not find this one in a book. You won't hear it recited by priests or printed on signs. But if you sit near an old fire or listen at the edge of a storm, you might hear the shape of it in the wind. It's passed from voice to voice, low and steady, like river water under ice. No one claims to have seen it with their own eyes, and yet no one dares to say it didn't happen. They left a girl in the forest. She was blamed, you see, as people blame what they fear. For the bad crops, the stillbirths, the long silence of rain. They said she'd cursed them, brought shadow into their homes, angered the spirits of the woods. So they bound her hands, whispered prayers they didn't understand, and walked her into the trees. They thought the forest would take her. And it did. But not in the way they expected. No one saw her return, not truly. Oh, they saw someone, tall, strange, marked by water light. But by then she was no longer the girl they'd named and shamed. She didn't come to punish. She came to warn, to remind, to offer one last chance. The ones who listened lived long, grew fruit in thin soil, woke from dreams smiling and didn't know why. The ones who didn't, well, you don't hear their names anymore. That, too, is a kind of remembering. Now the tale is told around hearths and under eaves, in the hush of late hours, when only the truth dares speak. Sometimes she is called Elka, sometimes not. Sometimes she is a girl. Other times a spirit, a witch, a ghost. Her name changes with the telling, but her presence never does. She waits by the river. Not always seen, not always known. But there. They say the river leads only where it chooses. That its bends shift when you aren't watching. That the stones hum faintly if you ask them kindly. And at the very center of it all, where the deepest current flows, is her. Sitting on a stone that never sinks. Hair like mist. Eyes like night water. A beast at her side with a gaze that pierces through lies and lineage. Some say, the stories begin, always some say never I know, that if you get lost near the river she may still guide you home. But only if you ask without greed. Only if you are honest with your pain. Only if you remember that the forest hears everything, and forgets nothing. There are rules, of course. There are always rules in stories like this. You must never enter the forest with anger. You must never carry iron. You must bring an offering, something simple, something real, a ribbon, a memory, a truth you've never said aloud. You must listen more than you speak. And you must never, ever demand. If you do, the river might still answer. But not the way you hope. People still try. A merchant's son once entered the woods with silver in his pockets and promises on his tongue. He'd heard the tale and thought her a legend to be conquered. He walked for 3 days, shouting her name, leaving coins behind him like breadcrumbs. The forest swallowed every sound. He never returned. But sometimes, if you walk the western bend at dusk, you'll see a small pile of silver at the foot of a crooked birch, polished clean by the rain, untouched by moss. A widow came once, barefoot, her grief knotted in her hands. She said nothing. Only laid a bundle of rosemary at the water's edge and wept. When she rose, the river sang. She left a different woman, not healed perhaps, but whole in a new way. She returned every year, not to ask for anything but to remember. A girl with no name found her way there during the first thaw. She had wandered from a village that didn't want her, heart scraped raw, fingers cracked from cold. She knelt by the river, not knowing what to say, not knowing if she would rise again. When the sun broke through the trees, she was gone. Some say the woman on the stone had changed after that, sat straighter, smiled softer, moved with a new rhythm. Stories shift after all. Like water. There is a saying now in the villages that border the old woods. If you are lost, go to the river. If you are found, stay away. It means more than it says. It means you do not go to the forest out of boredom or greed or pride. But if something inside you has unraveled, if the world has turned you wrong side out, the river might hold your shape until you remember it again. It does not promise comfort, only truth. Elders teach the tale to their grandchildren not with fear but with reverence. They speak of the girl who became something more, not because she sought power but because she listened when no one else did. They teach the song of the river in soft hums, in lullabies made of old words. They walk the edges of the forest with their palms open, never closed. And they never, ever speak ill of the mist. You ask me if I believe it? I do. Not because I've seen her, though I might have once at the bend near the standing stone, where the lilies bloom even in frost. I believe because the forest still hums when you say her name with kindness. Because the river still answers in quiet, curious ways. Because there are places in the world where the old stories live, not on paper, not in ink, but in bark and stream and silence. And she is one of them. She is the story. Alive. Changing. Endless. One night, long after the first frost, a child awoke from a dream and walked into the woods. No one saw her go. The door didn't creak. The dogs didn't bark. She moved as if called. She found the river without searching. And on the stone sat a woman with silver hair. No words passed between them. The woman reached out her hand. The child took it. And far away, in a village that no longer feared the dark, a new tree grew overnight, tall and strong, its bark the color of moonlight. The next morning the elders lit candles without knowing why. And the forest smiled.